15 years is long enough for a room to decide what you are before you get your coat off. Mine had decided I was a warning, and it had managed the whole thing without me. Gus Whitlock told me so at the coat rack, in the exact words, "Everyone is really glad you came." Gus has run this class for 15 years. He makes the calls, he books the room, and nobody has ever needed him for anything. Top floor, glass on two sides, the river going orange underneath us. 31 of us, round tables, low light, and a menu with no prices printed anywhere on it. I do not hate these evenings. I had been telling myself that since the car. Here is what I do for a living. I break things children are not supposed to be able to open. Gates, latches, caps, cabinets, the little plastic clip that holds a stroller together. A company prints the words child resistant on a box, and my job is to find out how long that sentence survives contact with an actual child. Usually under a minute. Once, memorably, under 9 seconds. 11 people work for me. We have a test floor, a drop rig, and a name that means something inside a very small industry. In March I bought out the last piece of the company that was not mine. That is the whole story of my 30s. Floor, a name, a small crew who like me fine. What I did not have was anybody at home, and the room had counted before the soup came out. They always do. Somebody asks what you do, and somebody else asks who you do it with, and the second question is the only one anybody is actually listening to. I said the company was good. I said we had grown. The woman on my left said that was wonderful in the voice people keep for a dog that has learned a trick, and then asked if I was seeing anyone. I said no. She made a small sound with her mouth closed. That sound has followed me around for 6 years and I have stopped trying to give it a name. Tobias Renner had the middle table with his back to the window, which is the seat where the light finds you. He had been working the room since the coats, and he is very good at it. He puts a hand on your arm, asks about the hard year you had, does the whole thing with his face, and remembers every word you give him. 15 years ago everybody watched Tobias. This year nobody had asked him a single question, and he had noticed. I could see him noticing. He kept starting sentences louder than they needed to be. So he came for me, because I was the only story in that room that had not been told yet. He arrived behind my chair with a bottle and poured without asking. He said he had looked me up. He said the website was serious. He said I had done extremely well for myself, and he leaned on the word myself until it bent. I said thank you. That is usually enough. Hand people nothing and most of them get bored and go find somebody who will argue back. Tobias does not get bored. Tobias escalates. He straightened up and tapped his glass with a ring, and the tables went quiet in that slow spreading way, one conversation at a time, until the only sound left was a waiter setting down a plate and thinking better of it. He said he wanted to say something about an old friend, and he said it with warmth. He is genuinely warm. That is what nobody believes afterwards, and it is the entire reason he works. He said that at 22 Wyatt Doran was going to build something, and that Wyatt Doran had gone and built it, which almost nobody in this room could say. It got a small honest sound out of them. He let it sit. He checked the left side of the room, then the right. Then he lifted the glass and said, to Wyatt, who made the whole world safe for children and never got around to keeping one. The room went off like a struck match. 31 people, and about 20 of them laughed before they had time to decide to, which is the only kind of laugh that means anything. Gus put his hand over his eyes. The woman on my left studied the tablecloth. Somebody at the back said, "Oh, come on," in the tone you use for a thing you are enjoying and disapprove of. I want to be accurate about this, because I have gone over it since. It did not hurt the way he meant it to. It landed lower and duller than that, the way a thing lands when it is not clever, only true enough to repeat. I did not stand up. Standing up agrees that it was a speech. I turned my glass a quarter turn on the cloth, looked at him, and said he was still doing it. He smiled and asked, "Doing what?" I said he checks the room after every sentence, left side first, then the right. He did it at 19 and he had just done it twice in front of everybody. I said it must be exhausting, working that hard at a dinner where nobody is keeping score. Nobody laughed. That is considerably worse than laughing. 20 people turned to see what Tobias would do with his face, and Tobias found out what it is like to be the thing in the middle of the table. He said fair enough and sat down 2 seats from where he had been standing. It was not his seat. I turned my glass back the other quarter turn. My hands were steady, and I remember being mildly pleased about that, and that is the last thought I ever had as a man with no children. The door hit the stop behind me. Not opened. Hit. There is a specific noise a door makes when whoever is pushing it has committed their entire body weight and has no plan for the second half. Something came past the first table at a dead run. 5-year-olds do not run well. The top half is trying to get somewhere and the bottom half is still negotiating the terms. She came around the service station, clipped a chair leg, did not slow down, and crossed the last 4 meters of that room at full speed with both arms already out in front of her. She hit my leg and held on. Both arms all the way round, the side of her face against my knee, and a grip like somebody had once told her to hang on to something in a river. The room made no sound at all. I have been in 2 rooms that quiet in my life and the other one was a hospital corridor at 4 in the morning. She tipped her head back to look up at me from down there. Small red face, hair coming loose from whatever it had been tied into. Good coat, party shoes, rubber boots pulled on over the party shoes, which somebody had clearly lost an argument about. Then she said, "Dad. I want to be honest about what happened in my head, because it was not the thing that happens in stories." I counted the tables. There are 12 tables in that room. I counted them. Then I counted the exits, too, and then I noticed the door had a soft close arm that had failed, which is why it hit the stop. I made a note to mention it to somebody. The whole procedure took perhaps 2 seconds and did nothing for me whatsoever. When my brain came back it arrived without any of the useful parts. She said it again, because I had not answered. Louder. That one went all the way to the back wall. Somebody dropped cutlery. Somebody else said, quietly and with total sincerity, "What?" I got down. Not all the way, only onto one knee, so we were closer to the same height, because she was doing all the work of looking up and it seemed unfair to make her keep doing it. Who did she come here with? Mum was in the car, being slow. How did she even get up here? 16 floors, a lobby with a desk, a lift that wants a card. A lady held the door for her, and she said thank you. Behind me the room had started again, and it was not talk yet, it was the noise before talk, 31 people inhaling at once. Her left hand was shut. Not resting. Shut, thumb wrapped over the fingers, the way you hold something you have been told not to lose. There was a corner of yellow sticking out between her knuckles. A centimeter of it, maybe. Card stock. I looked at it and felt something flat and cold that I had no name for yet. I did not ask. I had about 900 questions that night and the yellow thing was not in the top 10. Then the door went again, properly this time, and the room stopped for the second time. Marisol Quint came in fast and then stopped just inside, and it was the stopping I noticed. 6 years. She had not aged so much as resolved, the way a photograph does when it finishes loading. Dark coat still on, no bag, hair pushed back with one hand about a minute earlier and not looked at since. Everyone here had spent 6 years telling the story of the girl from our class who vanished and came back a billionaire. And here she was, and the first thing she did in front of all of them was arrive too late. I watched her find the shape of it. The kneeling man, the child attached to his leg, 31 witnesses, 2 phones already up. She had planned something. You could see the plan die. It went out of her face in one piece, like a slide changing on a screen behind a speaker who has not noticed. Bias got there first, because of course he did, and because he had a seat to win back. He said, "Marisol," and he laughed, and he said the kid has grabbed the wrong man. He was giving her the door. I understood that about 8 seconds later. He was handing her the misunderstanding, gift-wrapped, and every person in that room expected her to take it. Half of them had already begun arranging their faces to pretend they believed her. She did not take it. She crossed to us, and she did not look at Tobias, and she did not look at the room. I think that insulted them more than anything else that happened that night. She looked at me. And then she said the thing she had written. She said, "This is Poppy. She is 5 years old. She is yours. I will answer every question you have, but not tonight and not here." Flat. Even. Word for word, in the voice you use for the second sentence of a presentation. She had built that for a corridor. She had built it for a doorway, or a car park, or the 10 quiet seconds between a lift and a room. She said it anyway, out loud, to 31 people and 2 phones, because it was what she had brought and she does not improvise. The room came apart. Not loudly, at first. It went the other way, into a hiss, everybody turning to the person beside them at the same moment. Gus stood up, had no idea why he had stood up, and sat down. Somebody laughed one hard bark and cut it off. Poppy pushed her face into my shoulder because it had got loud, and I put my hand on her back without deciding to. That was the first thing my body did all night that I did not have to think about first. I stood up with her still holding on. Why tonight? Because in March you stopped needing anything. It was not an answer. It was a fact with the middle taken out, and she handed it over the way she has always handed things over, complete and useless. I said that was not what I asked. She said she knew. That is the entire haul from that room. 2 sentences and a fact about March. I looked around and did the arithmetic everybody there had already done, and it comes out the same however you run it. She left 6 years ago, in the last week of August. The child on my arm was 5. Nobody said it out loud. 31 people worked it out at the same moment and every one of them had the decency to look at their plate, except 2, and one of the 2 was filming. And it went very still, because they were all waiting for the same thing. They wanted me to leave. That is the shape of it. That is what the whole evening had been building towards since the coat rack. The man picks up the child, the man walks out, the door closes behind him, and the room gets a year of material. Tobias had already turned his chair round to watch me go. I pulled my chair out and sat back down. Poppy climbed onto my knee like it was a chair she had used before, arranged herself, and put her shut left hand on the table next to my bread plate. Marisol was still standing. I do not think anybody had left that woman standing anywhere in 6 years. The room had absolutely no idea what to do with any of it. 31 adults, mid-course, with the main event refusing to end. I asked Gus to pass the bread. Gus, God bless him, passed the bread. The bread came round. Nobody ate any of it. 31 people sat in front of a course they had ordered an hour ago and discovered that they could not remember how eating worked. A waiter came to clear and stopped halfway to the table, holding a plate, doing arithmetic about whether this was a good moment. Was not. He left with the plate. Poppy looked at everything. That is what she does, I have learned since. She takes a room in one long sweep, decides what is interesting, and then reports on it out loud without any filter at all. She said the window was very big. She said the men over there had gone red. That was Tobias. He had, rather badly. Somebody 2 tables down laughed, and this time it was not at me, and I watched Tobias hear the difference. He heard it exactly. He went back to his phone and did not look up for 9 minutes. Marisol had taken the empty chair on my other side without asking, which was the first thing she had done all evening that looked like her. She sat with her coat still on and her hands flat on the cloth. I have thought about that since. She sat like somebody waiting outside an examination room. She said we should do this properly tomorrow. She said there was an office we could use, and a car could come at 9, and that Poppy would be at nursery so we could speak without an audience. Every part of that was reasonable. Every part of it was a schedule. I said no. I did not say it hard. There was no point being hard about it, and there was a child on my knee, and I would like the record to show that I understood the shape of the evening by then. I said she had chosen the room. She had chosen the night, and the people, and the 15-year gap, and she did not get to choose the ending as well. She looked at me for a moment. Then she said, all right. Just that. She has never once argued with a fact. Then Poppy said she was hungry. She said it the way children do, as new information of great importance, and the whole thing tipped over from a scene into an evening with a hungry person in it. I said we would fix that, and I picked up a menu, and I got about 4 seconds into feeling competent because I did not know what she could eat. I did not know if she could eat any of it. I did not know if there was a thing that would put her in a hospital, and I did not know whether 5-year-olds eat fish. I have a laboratory. I have a wall of standards and a shelf of tolerance tables and 11 people who call me when a number looks wrong. I sat there holding a menu like a man holding a document in a language he cannot read. I asked Marisol what she eats. Marisol opened her mouth and did not immediately answer, and I understood something about her right then that took me another 4 weeks to say out loud. She knew. Of course she knew. She had to go and get it, from somewhere behind the plan, and there was a half-second where the machine had to look it up. Then the lift doors went across the room and a woman came out of them at speed with a coat over her arm and a bag that had a juice carton sticking out of it. Bex Almeida crossed that dining room the way a nurse crosses a ward. She did not look at 31 people. 31 people looked at her and she spent nothing on it. She reached us, put the bag on the table, and said to Poppy, in the voice of somebody continuing a conversation from 20 minutes earlier, that we do not run off, and that we have talked about this. Poppy said sorry in a very small voice and did not let go of my sleeve. Bex looked at me for about a second and a half. She took in the kneeling, the sleeve, the whole tableau, and she filed it, and then she went straight past it to what mattered. She said no shellfish, nothing with sesame, and she is not allergic, she just throws it back up and then nobody sleeps. She said the kitchen can do plain pasta with butter if you ask them nicely and mean it. She said Poppy had eaten at 5:30 and would need something now and something else at bedtime or the morning would be a disaster. She said all of this to me. Not to Marisol. To me. In under 15 seconds, and it was the single most competent thing that happened in that room all night, and it was performed by the only person present who had no title in this. I said thank you. She said it was fine, and did not mean anything by it, and went to find a waiter herself rather than wait for one. Here is the thing, I am not going to dress up. 9 minutes earlier I had taken a room apart with one sentence, and now everybody at the table had watched me fail to feed my own child. Tobias saw it. He did not use it. That is worth writing down, because it is the only time in this whole business that he had something and did not use it, and I still do not know what to do with that. I felt it land and I let it land. I did not explain myself. Explaining yourself in that room would have been the second most expensive thing I could have done that night. The most expensive would have been leaving, and I had already not done that. The pasta arrived faster than anything else had all evening. Poppy ate it with total concentration, one hand still holding my sleeve, which made the fork work harder than it needed to. Her left hand had come open on the tablecloth to do this. She had put the yellow thing down next to my bread plate to free the hand up. I looked at it properly for the first time. It was a tag. Yellow card stock, about the size of 2 stamps, one corner rounded, a punched hole at the top with a fiber washer round it. I know that tag. I designed that tag years ago at a kitchen table because we needed something that survives a warehouse and does not blow off in a draft. We tie one to anything that fails. Yellow means it failed. There is a space at the top for the item, a space in the middle for the mode of failure, and a box at the bottom for the code. The code is a real thing. 6 characters. The first 2 are the standard, the middle 2 are the test series, the last 2 are the engineer. Mine are doctorate has been DR since there were 2 of us. This one said something in the code box, in careful handwriting, in the right size, in the right ink, in exactly the right place on the card. And it was not a code. It was 6 characters that had the shape of 1 and the rhythm of 1 and meant nothing whatsoever. Somebody had looked at my tags long enough to copy them and had never once needed to know what the numbers said. The handwriting was not mine. It was not Ines. It was not any of the 11. I have signed off perhaps 40,000 of those and I know every hand that has ever written on one. I said, quietly, so that it stayed on our side of the table, where did you get this? Poppy did not look up from the pasta. He said, from you. I did not say anything. I could not think of anything that was not a question I had no right to ask a 5-year-old. Marisol was looking at the tablecloth. Her hands had not moved from where she put them when she sat down. She did not offer me anything and I did not ask her in front of the child, and that is the only decision either of us got right that night. They left at 9. Bex carried the bag and Poppy walked between them holding Bex's hand, and at the door she turned round and waved at me with the whole arm, the way they do, and 31 people watched her do it. I went down in the lift with Marisol because there was one lift. There is no dignified way to stand next to somebody in a lift for 16 floors after that, so I did not try. I asked about March. She said the buyout closed on the 12th. I said that was not public. She said it was, if you read the right filing, and that she had. I said fine. Then I asked why the 12th of March mattered enough to be an answer to a question about tonight. The doors opened into the lobby. She stepped out and turned round and stood there in the middle of all that marble with her coat still done up. She said, because I promised myself I would not come near you until you did not need one single thing from anybody, and on the 12th of March that became true, and I checked. I said, you checked? She said yes. There was a very long moment in that lobby. The doorman looked at his desk with tremendous dedication. I said, how would you know to check? And Marisol Quint, who has never lied to me, not once, not even 6 years ago when it would have been kinder, did the thing she does instead. She said, I will answer that. Not tonight. What I got, over the days that followed, was a schedule. It arrived by message on the Sunday. Tuesday and Thursday, 4 until 6, at the house. A car would come for me at 3:30, which I declined, and then came anyway on the Tuesday, and waited. I want to be fair about the house. It was not a fortress and she was not hiding my daughter in a vault. It was a tall gray building on a quiet road with a garden wall and a gate in the wall, and a keypad on the gate. The visits were faultless. That is the only word. There was fruit cut into pieces. There was a low table with paper on it. There was a woman called Nadia who is very good with children and who was in the room for both hours of the first visit, and 1 hour of the second. Bex was in the house each time and did not come in, which I understood as a kindness and later understood as something a great deal more careful than that. Marisol was not there. Either time. She had put herself outside her own arrangement, and I could not decide for a week whether that was generosity or the cleanest way to avoid 2 hours of questions. Poppy drew. She drew a horse with the legs coming out of the wrong parts, and a house, and a thing that turned out to be the river. She talked the entire time. I learned that she is 5 and 3 months. I learned that she does not like the word nap and prefers rest, and that this distinction is not negotiable. I learned that her second best friend at nursery is called Wren and her best friend changes weekly, and that she has strong views about which coats are for which weather. I learned almost nothing about the 6 years. That is not what a 5-year-old is for. I was not going to interrogate my own child, and I did not. Here is what I did learn. At 8 minutes to 6 on the second Thursday, while I was putting the lids back on the pens. Was I going back to work far away after? I said what? After this, do you go back to work far away? She asked it politely, the way you ask about a bus. I do not work far away. I said my work is about 20 minutes from here and I go there every day and I have gone there every day since it opened. She thought about that. Then she said, but you only come on Tuesdays and Thursdays. There is not a great deal you can say to that. She was not sad about it. That was the part that took the skin off. She was not sad, she was filing it, because it fitted everything she had ever been told. For 4 years the story had been that her father was somewhere else and very busy. Now her father came on Tuesdays and Thursdays between 4 and 6, in a car that was sent, for 2 hours, and then went away again. I had been in that house 4 times and every single visit had proved the story true. I drove back to the lab and sat in the car park for a while and did the thing I do, which is to describe a problem in the flattest possible terms until I can see where it actually is. The problem was not access. I had access 4 hours a week, more if I asked, and she would have given me more if I had asked. The problem was that every hour I had was an appointment, and a child of 5 does not have the equipment to tell an appointment from an absence. They are the same object to her. Somebody comes when it is arranged and is not there when it is not. Whatever I did next had to be an hour that nobody had arranged. Ines Vargas has been my partner for 9 years and she owns a third of everything. She was at the bench when I came in, doing the thing where she does not look up. She said, without looking up, that Thursday the 22nd was the witness test on the cot batch, all day, and that the clientsman was flying in for it, and that this had been in the diary since May. I said I knew. She said good, and turned a page, and that was the whole conversation, and it was also the entire warning, because Ines does not say anything twice. I moved the witness test. I did it on the Monday, and I did it myself, and I did not dress it up. I told them a personal matter had come up and offered them the following Wednesday. They did not take the following Wednesday. There is another lab 2 hours north that will do a witness test at 3 days' notice, and by Thursday morning the batch was on a truck going there. That is 41,000 out of a good year, and a client we had held for 6 years, and something that costs more than the money, which is that the whole industry finds out in about a fortnight that Doran will move a witness test. Ines put the number on a piece of paper and left it on my desk without a word on it. She was not being cruel. She was being accurate, which is what I pay her for and what I would have done. I want to be clear that I knew all of that on the Monday, before I moved it, and I moved it anyway, and I have never once pretended to myself that it was free. Tuesday I did as I was told and went at 4 in the sent car. Wednesday I went at 10:30 in the morning, in my own car, having told nobody. I want to set out what I was doing, because it looks like a gesture and it was not one. I was not there to take her anywhere. I was not there to make a point at Marisol, who was in another country that week. I was there so that one time, my daughter could look up and find me somewhere that nobody had put in a diary. That is the whole of it. I had worked out that I could not explain it to a 5-year-old, so it had to be done rather than said. I parked, and walked to the gate, and pressed the button on the panel, and Bex Almeida answered. She said, "Is she expecting you?" I said no. I said I was not here to take her out and I would stand in the garden and I would go when I was told to go. There was a pause of perhaps 5 seconds. Then Bex said, "I am sorry, I cannot let you in when it is not arranged, and I need you to hear that I am not being difficult." She said that if she opened that gate to anybody who arrived wanting to see Poppy, on any day, for any reason, then there is no gate. She said it perfectly levelly and she was completely right. I said I understood. I did understand. I have written the same sentence into 40 reports. A barrier that opens for good reasons is not a barrier, it is a courtesy. Then she said something I did not expect. She said, I will tell her you came. And she meant it, and she did. So I stood on the pavement outside a garden wall on a Wednesday morning, in the rain, which is the single most humiliating image in this entire account, and I am putting it in on purpose. 'Cause here is the thing about that gate. It was a 2-stage magnetic latch with a thumb release under a shroud. I have failed that mechanism 11 times in 4 years. It is on my own list. The shroud is a molding, and moldings flex. I could have had it open before she finished ringing the bell, without leaving a mark on it, and every one of those seconds was available to me, standing there in the rain, with nobody watching. I did not touch it. I want that written down plainly, because it is the only part of the next 5 weeks that I am actually proud of. There is a difference between a man who can open a thing and a man who opens it, and my whole trade lives in that difference. If I go over that wall, then I am something that gets in. And she has a mother who has spent 5 years making sure that nothing gets in. So I stood there and got wet, and after about 40 minutes I decided I had made my point to precisely nobody, and I turned to go back to the car. And behind me the gate went. Not the buzz. The other noise, the mechanical one, the shroud coming off its seat with the small dry crack that I could pick out of 100. Poppy had gone into the kitchen, taken the 2-step stool that lives by the counter, carried it across a garden by herself, put it against the wall under the panel, climbed it, and done both stages of that release in the right order. Both stages. In order. Because she has watched adults do it 400 times, and that is not a lock, that is a demonstration. She got the gate open about a hand's width and put her face in the gap and said, hello. Behind her, Bex arrived at a flat run and stopped dead when she saw the stool. I did not go in. I crouched down on the pavement side and we had a conversation through a gap in a gate for about 4 minutes, most of which was about the rain. Bex stood behind her the whole time with her hand on the gate and did not close it and did not open it any further, and I have thought since that this was the most difficult thing anybody did that week. Marisol called me that night from wherever she was, and it was the first time in 6 years that I heard her voice do something it had not planned. She said, she took the stool. I said yes. She said, there is a keypad, and a magnetic latch, and it is rated for children up to 8. I said I know. I said I have failed that exact latch more times than I can defend. I said the rating is a laboratory number and the laboratory is a room with no motivation in it. I said that if you want to know whether a child can get through something, the only question that matters is whether she has a reason on the other side. There was a long silence on that line. Then Marisol said, very quietly, that she would have a document drawn up by Friday. Days, hours, holidays, school, all of it, properly, signed, so that none of this depended on anybody's mood. I have gone over this more than any other thing I said in 5 weeks, and I would say it again. No paper. It was to protect me, she said. I would have rights on a page instead of an arrangement she could end. I said I know exactly what it buys me, and I know what it costs, and it costs the same thing it cost 6 years ago. I said a paper decides what I am allowed, and once we have both signed what I am allowed, that is the ceiling forever, and neither of us will ever go above it again. I would rather have nothing on paper and be somebody who turns up on a Wednesday. Not a sensible way to live, she said. No, it is not. I put the phone down, and stood in my kitchen, and understood that I had just refused the only guarantee I was ever likely to be offered. The clip went up on the Saturday. 41 seconds, shot from table 9, held steady, which tells you it was not a reflex. It is a good clip. That is the miserable part. It opens on Tobias with his glass up, gets the whole toast, swings left as the door hits the stop, and catches a small girl crossing a dining room at a dead run. You can hear her say it twice. You can hear a fork go down, and it holds long enough to get Marisol Quint standing in a doorway with her coat on, saying she is 5 years old, she is yours. Tobias did not fake a single frame of it. I want to be exact about him, because being wrong about Tobias would be a comfortable mistake and I have no use for it. He does not invent. He has never once invented. He takes things that genuinely happened and he chooses the day they are seen, and that is the whole trick, and it cannot be answered by saying it is not true. By Sunday lunchtime the class group had 460 messages. Gus, who had built that group in a more innocent era, spent 2 days trying to be a moderator and then went quiet in a way I found genuinely upsetting. People I had not spoken to in 15 years sent me the clip. A woman called Marnie, who had sat 3 seats down from me at the dinner and never once spoken to me directly, sent it twice with no message at all. A man named Osei, who I half remembered from the football team, wrote only that he hoped the little girl was doing all right. Most of the rest sent it to tell me they were disgusted by it. On Monday morning my lab had 9 calls before 10. 1 was a supplier, 1 was a magazine. 7 were from people who wanted to know if the man in the video was the same Doran on the certificates. Ines took most of them. Ines has a telephone manner that could sterilize equipment. By Tuesday she had put a line in the answerphone message and stopped apologizing for it. The 11 were very good about it, in the specific way that is worse than being bad about it. Nobody mentioned it. Everybody had watched it. Somebody had clearly circulated a rule that nobody was to mention it, and I would like to know who, because I would like to thank them. Then it turned, and it turned the way these things do, which is sideways. Somebody put the toast on it as a caption. Made the world safe for children, never got around to keeping one, sitting in white letters across a frame of Tobias with his glass in the air and a child arriving behind him. He had written his own caption at the reunion and he had set it into a room with a camera in it, and now it was on the front of the thing, and it was not about me anymore. By Wednesday the most shared version of that clip had his face on the cover of it. He had made himself the story. He had been trying to do that for 15 years and he finally managed it, and it was not the way he wanted. He posted twice about context, which is the sound a man makes going under, and I would have enjoyed all of it, I think, genuinely, for at least a week. Except that on the Wednesday afternoon the nursery rang Marisol and asked whether Poppy might stay at home for a few days. There were 2 men with cameras across the road from a nursery who were not doing anything illegal. They were standing on a pavement photographing a gate, and the nursery had 11 other families to think about, and it asked, very politely, and it was right to ask. So the account of the week is this. Grown people made a piece of content out of an evening, and the cost of it was taken out of a 5-year-old, who lost her week, her friends, and her painting table, and who had done nothing except run across a room. That is the sentence I could not get out of my head, and it is the sentence that decided everything I did next. Marisol's people moved on the Thursday. I found out about it the way I found out about most things that fortnight, which is that it had already been done. There was a statement. It went to 4 places at once and it was extremely well made. It confirmed that Ms. Quint has a daughter, that the child's father is involved in her life, and that the family asks for the child's privacy to be respected. Then it asked, in the last line, that people consider the effect of all this on a 5-year-old, which was true, and correct, and worked, and which I only found out existed late at night when a supplier sent it to me. I read it 4 times. Not for the reason you would think. I read it because of the words the child's father. That is what I was in it. Not a name. An involved party. A category. It was a good statement. It protected her. It was also a document about my life that I learned about from a supplier, and it described me the way you describe a fixture in a room you are selling. I want to be precise about what I felt, because self-pity is the most expensive thing available to a man in my position and I could not afford any. It was not hurt. It was recognition. That was the 6 years, in one line, in a press statement. Something happens that concerns Wyatt Doran, and it is handled well, and Wyatt Doran finds out afterwards. I went to see Tobias on the Friday. Not to threaten him. I had nothing to threaten him with, and he had done nothing that could be undone. I went because he was the only person in the whole mess who wanted something, and people who want something can be talked to. He picked a coffee place with tall windows and sat where he could see the door. It looked terrible, and he was delighted to see me, and both of those things were completely sincere. He talked for 6 minutes before I said anything. He said the clip had got away from him. He said the caption was cruel. He said he had never intended any of it to touch the child. I believed about half. The half about the child I believed entirely, and it did not make any difference to what had happened. Then he got to it. He turned his cup round twice and said that what would actually help, what would put the whole thing straight, was if he could sit down with Marisol. 20 minutes. Nothing hostile. He said he could make it the piece that ended it rather than the piece that ran it. He said he was the only one who could, because he was the only one who had been in the room. There it was. He did not want money and he did not want an apology. He wanted an introduction. He has wanted an introduction to somebody, his entire life. I said no. He said think about it. I said I had thought about it in the car, which was true, because I am not so slow that I could not see the shape of the conversation before I sat down. He stopped being warm, which I had been waiting for, and told me 2 things I did not know. He told me that 4 other people had filmed at least part of that evening and that 2 of them had offered him footage. And he told me that the interesting story was never the child anyway. He said the interesting story is that a woman worth what she is worth walked into a room and said a prepared sentence, and that anybody who has met her knows she does not do anything unprepared, so somebody should be asking what she was preparing for. He said it lightly. He is very good. He put it down in front of me like a man putting down a card he is happy to lose, and he watched my face to find out whether it was worth anything. I have not been that careful with my face in a long time. It was worth something, and I think he knew. I said I could not help him, and I paid for the coffee and I left, and I sat in the car for a while, because he had just told me the truth about my own life for free and by accident. He was right. That is what I had been circling for days without saying it. Nobody had told her the room, the night, and the date. Somebody had. I went to see Gus on the Saturday and asked him straight out. Gus went the color of the tablecloth and told me everything in about 90 seconds. She had called him in June. Was I coming? Probably not, he had told her, because I had said no twice. She had asked him to try again. Gus made 4 phone calls to get me to that reunion. I remember the 4th one. I remember thinking that Gus Whitlock was a lonely man with a spreadsheet. He was not. He was the only working part of somebody else's plan, and he did not know it, and when he worked it out sitting opposite me he put his hands over his face. He said he was sorry. I said he had nothing to be sorry for, and I meant it, and I told him that he had made a phone call that got me a daughter, and that I would take that trade every day for the rest of my life. He cried a bit. It was 10 in the morning in a garden center cafe. Gus has organized the class for 15 years and nobody has ever needed him for anything, and it turned out somebody had needed him for the only thing that mattered. Then I went home and did the one thing left that was mine to do. The story had exactly one thing keeping it alive, which was that nobody involved had said anything in their own voice. A statement is not a voice. A statement is a shape made by 4 people around a table. So I put it in the class group. 460 messages, all of them about me, and none of them from me. I wrote it the way I write findings, because it is the only way I know how to write anything that matters. Short lines, no adjectives, nothing that could be quoted as feeling. I wrote that Poppy is my daughter. That I did not know until the 29th of August. That her mother and I have not discussed the reasons in public and are not going to. I wrote that the child had lost a week of nursery over it. I wrote the number, which was 6 days. I wrote that anybody who wanted to know anything further could ask me directly, and that I would answer, and that I was not going to do it anywhere that sells advertising. Then I put my actual phone number on the end of it, which Ines describes to this day as the single stupidest professional decision of my life, and which worked. 40 people had it inside an hour. It was on the sites by the evening. There is nothing to do with a secret that its owner has just read out, so within 4 days there was nothing there and everybody went to look at something else. 9 people rang the number. 6 were kind. 2 were journalists, and I answered both, and they were disappointed in the way people are when they get access and find only a man giving accurate short answers. The 9th was Marisol. She did not say hello. She said, "You gave them your telephone number." I said yes. She said that was reckless and unnecessary and that her people had it under control. I said her people had it under control the way you have a fire under control when you have agreed with it about which rooms it may have. She was quiet for a moment. Then, Poppy goes back to nursery on Monday. Good. Then she said the other thing, fast, the way you say something you have rehearsed and are no longer sure of. Come to the house on Saturday. Not 4 until 6. Come in the morning and stay for the day and see it properly. She said, I think you have earned the right to see what the 6 years actually looked like. I said I would come. And then she said the sentence I have thought about more than any other from that whole month. She said, you will not like it. I got there at 8:30 on the Saturday and stayed until 8 at night, and I have to report, because it is true, that most of it was good. I had gone in ready to find something wrong. I think I wanted to. A man wants the 6 years he missed to have been a failure, because that is easier than the alternative, and the alternative was waiting for me in the kitchen eating toast. She is a good mother. I am putting that down plainly and early because everything else I have to say about Marisol Quint sits on top of it and does not move it. The house works. There is a rhythm in it and the rhythm belongs to the child. Breakfast happens at a time. Shoes live in one place. There is a wall in the kitchen with the week on it in colors, and Poppy can read it, and does, and argues with it. Bex runs that house the way I have seen perhaps 4 people in my life run anything. She was off duty that Saturday and came in anyway for 2 hours because it was a strange day for Poppy and she did not want to be somewhere else. Nobody asked her to. She did not mention that she had done it. I noticed because it is my job to notice which part is actually carrying the load. Poppy gave me the tour. It took an hour and 40 minutes and covered every room, twice, plus the airing cupboard, which was the highlight. And I could not stop working. That is a fault of mine and I have made my peace with it. I walked round the most expensive house I have ever been inside and my hands kept finding things. The stair gate at the top was fitted to the plasterboard rather than the stud, which will hold for years and then one day will not. I said so. Banister spindles were 130 millimeters apart, which is fine for 8 years old and not fine for a child who climbs. The oven had a lock that comes off if you pull it sideways. The pond in the garden had a mesh over it rated for leaves. I said all of this out loud, in order, without being asked, in the manner of a man who has forgotten he is a guest, and about 20 minutes and I heard a noise and turned round and Marisol was writing it down. Not politely. Actually writing it down, on the back of an envelope, with a pen off the counter, and she had 4 items already. She caught me looking and did not apologize for it. She said, "Keep going." So I did the whole house. It took another 40 minutes. She wrote down 9 things and by the end she had turned the envelope over and started a second column, and Poppy trailed after us telling me which of the 9 things she had already worked out how to defeat. 3 of them. She had defeated 3 of them and told nobody, because nobody had ever asked her. That was the best hour of my life to that point and I would like the record to show that it was spent listing safety faults with my ex-wife in a hallway. Somewhere in the middle of that day I understood the technique, and once I had seen it I could not stop seeing it. She answers. That is the thing about Marisol that nobody outside believes. She does not dodge, she does not go vague, she does not manage you. Ask her a question and you get a complete, accurate, generous answer. And when it is finished, so is the subject. The answer arrives with the door already closing behind it. You get everything you asked for and no way back in. I asked, over coffee mid-morning, why she left. She put the cup down and gave it to me straight, and it was not the answer I had spent 6 years building. She said the lab got its first real contract on the 17th of August and she left on the 28th. She said that for 2 years before that she had done the money, the clients, the tax, the nights, the arguing with the landlord, and my diary. She said she was good at all of it and nobody had ever once asked her to be. And she said that when the contract landed, 9 people rang the flat, and every one of them congratulated me. She said it without any heat at all. She said, and they were right too. It was your work. I did the work that made your work possible, and there is no name for what I did, and I had become it. She said she was 31 years old and had no idea what she was worth in a room where I was not standing, and that she found she could not go on not knowing. I asked why she did not simply say that. She said, because you would have fixed it. And that is the whole of it, and it took me another 2 weeks to admit that she was right. I would have made her a director and given her a title and a third of the company, that afternoon, gladly, and she would have spent the rest of her life as a woman whose worth had been issued to her. Then she said the ugly part herself, which I did not expect, and which is the reason I could never afterwards tell the story of my divorce as something that was done to me. She said, I wanted to find out badly enough that I was willing to end a marriage to do it. She said, I did find out. The answer turned out to be a great deal. She said, if you want me to tell you I regret the leaving, I cannot, because I do not, and I am not going to lie to you at this table. Then she picked the cup back up. Door closed. Complete answer, generous, true, and the subject was finished. We had lunch. It was extremely pleasant. Poppy ate 3 things and negotiated about a 4th, and around 2 o'clock I noticed that I had stopped asking anything, and that I had been in that house for 5.5 hours and had received exactly 1 answer, and that I was full and warm and had somehow agreed to a version of my own life without anybody putting it to me. That is what she does. She does not defeat you. She makes the room so comfortable that you forget you came in with a question. I would have gone home at 8 o'clock with that 1 answer and been grateful for it. I am certain of that. I came within about 4 hours of accepting the whole arrangement, permanently, out of sheer gratitude that it was not worse. What stopped it was Poppy's room, at 5:30, in the corner by the window. There is a length of garden twine pinned across the wall at her height. On it, on little wire hooks, hang 5 yellow tags. Doran Integrity. 2 stamps wide, rounded corner, punched hole, fiber washer. 5 of them, in a row, oldest on the left, and every one of them with 6 characters in the code box in that same careful hand. She took me over to them without any ceremony at all, because to her they had been on that wall her whole life. She said, that is 1 for every year. She said, you send me 1 every year, on my birthday, and Mum puts it up because I cannot reach. Then she went along the line with her finger. First one, when she was a baby, so she does not remember it. Second one, third one, the year she got the boots. And then she said the thing that took the floor out. She said, the writing is because you have to write small on the little box, and that is why it does not look like you're writing on the other one. The other one. She had seen my hand. The tag she carried into that reunion in her fist for 16 floors had been in her hand for a fortnight, and she had been comparing. I asked, as levelly as I have ever asked anything, whether I could see the last one. She unhooked it and put it in my palm. It was 3 months old. The card was right. The washer was right. The ink was right. The 6 characters in the code box were the same 6 characters that were on the other 4. The same on every one. 5 years of tags carrying an identical code, which in my trade would mean 5 identical failures on 5 identical items, and which in this house meant nothing at all, because whoever made them had never known that the box meant anything. I stood in the middle of a 5-year-old's bedroom, in the good light by the window, holding a forgery of my own signature. I want to be careful here. It was not rage. Rage would have been simpler, and I have had it since. Standing there, it was more like the moment in a test when the number comes back wrong and you realize the fault is not in the item, it is in everything you assumed before you started. For 4 years my daughter had proof that I existed and thought about her once a year. That proof was manufactured. Which means that for 4 years there had been a version of me living in this house. He was busy. He worked far away. He remembered her birthday. He was a good man who was not there, and he had been built carefully, out of things that were true about me, by somebody who knew me extremely well. And then Poppy went to the shelf and got the other thing, and gave it to me with both hands, and told me she had made it. Was a tag. Cut out of yellow card with scissors, badly, one corner gone at completely the wrong angle. Punched hole, no washer. On the front, in enormous crayon capitals, my name, and under it a horse. She said she made it in the spring. She said it was for me. Mum had it on her desk for a long time and then it came back, she said. What was it for? To send. I did not understand what I was holding. I want that on the record too, because I have gone over that minute perhaps 200 times since and I did not understand a single thing about it. I thought it was a drawing. Put it in my inside pocket and I said thank you, and I told her it was the best one on the wall, which was true, and she was extremely pleased. Then I went downstairs and found Marisol in the kitchen and put the 3-month-old tag on the counter between us. I did not raise my voice. Poppy was awake upstairs and the whole house carries. I said, you had these made. She looked at it for a moment. Then she said, yes. She did not reach for anything. She did not begin the sentence with a reason, which I have come to understand is the closest she gets to shame. 4 years ago, she said, Poppy asked whether you knew when her birthday was. And you could have told her the truth. She was too. That was not an answer to what she had asked me. No, it is not, Marisol said, and stopped. I picked the tag up off the counter, turned it over twice, and asked the only question I actually wanted answered. What else had she made? And Marisol Quint stood in her own kitchen and did not answer me, for the first time since I had come back into her life. She did not answer me in the kitchen. She answered me the better part of a fortnight later, on a Wednesday night, upstairs, in the room at the back of the house that she works in. I had asked 4 times by then. Twice on the telephone and once in a car park and once standing in her hall with my coat on. She did not refuse any of them. She kept saying, not tonight, which is a thing she can say indefinitely. What ended it was that I stopped asking and told her I would assume the worst available answer and act on it. I am not proud of that. It worked in about 9 seconds, which tells you something about how much she hates being wrongly understood. She went to a cupboard and took out a box file, and then a second one, and put them on the desk, and then she went and stood at the window with her back to me, which is the only cowardly thing I have ever seen that woman do. There were 24 reports on a quarter. 6 years. They were not what you are imagining. There was nothing sorted in them and nobody had been through my bins. It was a diligence firm, the kind that reads filings for people who buy companies, and she had simply pointed one at a person instead. Company accounts. Filed returns. 2 county court checks, both clean. Credit summary. Trade press mentions. Photographs, 4 in total, all taken in public places, all from a distance, all of them entirely legal and none of them anything I would have minded. And on the front of every single one, under the heading, for standing questions that somebody had been paid to answer for 6 years. Whether the business was solvent. Whether there was any debt secured on the home. whether his health was known to be poor, and whether he was in a relationship. I read that fourth line about 9 times. It is the only one of the 4 that has nothing to do with whether a man needs anything from anybody. I went through them in order, which took about 40 minutes, and she let me, and did not once say anything from the window. The third quarter of the second year is 2 pages long and the first line of it says no material change. I remember that quarter extremely well. That is the quarter I spent every night for 5 weeks in a chair beside my mother in the county hospital while they worked out what was wrong with her lungs, and it turned out to be treatable, and she is fine, and she asks after Poppy every Sunday now. But at the time I did not know that. And it says no material change. I put that page on the desk and I asked her whether she had read them. She said yes. All of them. Within a day of arrival, every quarter, for 6 years. What had she been checking for? Same 4 things. No, I said, and asked again, and to her credit she did not make me ask a third time. I was waiting for the year when you did not need anything, she said. And the 4th question, she said nothing for a while and then said, that one was not for the waiting. We had the row after that. It went on for perhaps 20 minutes and I am going to set out the 2 things that were said in it that actually mattered, because the rest was noise and neither of us meant it. I said that she had not protected my choice. I said that a choice you engineer is not a choice, and that she had not spent 6 years making sure I could say yes freely, she had spent 6 years making sure she never had to hear me say no. I said, you did not trust me with the question. You built a version of me that would have got it wrong, and then you took care of him instead. That one landed. I know it did because she did not answer it, then or ever. Then she hit back, and she is better at this than I am, because she does not raise her voice and she does not exaggerate and she only ever uses things that are true. She said, in 6 years, you never looked for me once. She said, I left an address with your mother in the November. I sent you a card when your father-in-law died, and you did not reply. I was in the trade press 4 times before I was in the financial press. You read the trade press every week of your life. She said, you did not need to find out where I was, Wyatt. She let that sit for a moment, and then she finished it. You needed to not know. She said, you have built a life with no unplanned events in it and you call it order and it is not order, and it is the reason I could stand in a doorway 6 years ago and know that if I walked out you would not come down the stairs after me. And I was right. You did not. I had nothing. I have had 2 months to find something and I still have nothing, because it is all true, every word of it, and the only thing I could say that night was that both of those things could be true at once. They can. That is not a resolution, it is just arithmetic. She built a fiction and I built a fortress and we were both extremely comfortable in them. We were not shouting. I want to be accurate. 2 people who do not shout can do a great deal of damage at conversational volume, and we did all of it in a room at the back of a house at about 9:10 at night. Poppy was on the stairs. She had been in bed for an hour and a half. She had come down for water, which she is allowed to do, and she got as far as the 4th step from the top. I do not know how much she heard. I know she heard her own name, because her name was in most of it, and I know she heard her mother say the word lied and I know she heard me say the word 6 years in a voice she had never heard me use. Here is what a 5-year-old does with that. She does not follow the argument. She takes the 2 loudest facts, which were her name and the anger, and she puts them next to each other, and she gets the only answer available to a person of 5. They are shouting about me. Before me they were not shouting. X found the bed empty at 20:10. The chain was on the front door, at adult height, untouched. The garden door was shut. The keypad on the gate had not been used, because the log says so, and the log is honest. The gate itself was standing open by about a hand's width, with the 2-step stool from the kitchen sitting neatly against the wall underneath the panel. She had put the stool back against the wall. Not knocked over. Placed. She had taken the time. I have failed that latch more times than I can defend, over several years of testing it. I wrote the paragraph in the report that says the shroud flexes, and the same mechanism, the same manufacturer, the same shroud, is on the side door of my own building, because 8 years ago I specified it myself on the grounds that it was the least bad one available. Next 50 minutes are the worst of my life and I am going to give them briefly, because I have no interest in performing them. Marisol's world came up out of the ground in about 4 minutes. Cars. 2 people at the door. Somebody on a phone reading out the plate of every vehicle on the street. It was extraordinarily efficient and it was completely useless, because it was all built to find things that get taken, and nobody had taken her. She had gone. You cannot search for a person who has gone the way you search for a person who has been removed. Marisol stood in the middle of her own hall and gave 4 correct instructions and then stopped, and I watched the machinery run out of things to be certain about, and it was the first time I ever saw her stand in a room with no next sentence in it. Bex was the one who said the true thing. She had her coat half on and she said, "She is not lost." She said, "She has gone somewhere. She is not the kind that wanders." And I knew where. Not by cleverness. I want to be extremely clear about that, because the version where the father works it out is a nicer story and it is not what happened. I knew because of a rule I had made a week or so earlier and had been quite pleased with myself about. The rule is that I answer her questions. All of them, properly, first time, no matter how small, because the whole of her life until August had been made of answers that were not true and I was not going to add to the pile. On the Saturday, in the airing cupboard, she had asked me where my work was. And I had told her. The 2nd street after the bridge, the building with the yellow door, 20 minutes, and you can see the river from the roof. I had given a 5-year-old my address, carefully, twice, because she asked me to say it again. I drove. I got there in 14 minutes and I have no memory of any part of that journey except that I was extremely calm, in the way you are calm at the top of a ladder. Side door was shut. The shroud on the 2-stage release had been pushed sideways and had gone back to its seat, the way it does, which is the whole reason it fails, which is what my report says on page 4. She was inside, on the test floor, in the dark, sitting on the drop rig. The drop rig is a steel platform at about the height of a chair with a hydraulic arm over it, and we use it to destroy furniture built for children. It is the only object in the entire building that is the correct height for a person of 5, and she had found it and sat on it and put her feet up on the rail. She had her coat on over her pajamas and her boots on the wrong feet and the yellow tag with my name and the horse on it in her right hand. She had come to deliver it. That is all. She had a thing to give somebody and she had been told where he was, and she is 5, so she went. She was not crying when I found her. She had been, some time earlier, and had stopped, and she had got herself as far as sitting quietly in a dark building on a machine, holding the thing she came to deliver, waiting for the men whose address it was. I sat down on the platform next to her and did not touch her for a moment because I could not entirely trust my hands. She said, "Is Mum still cross?" I said no. She said, "Is it because of me?" And I said no, and then I sat there and understood that no was not going to be enough, and that I had about 4 seconds to find something better, and that everything I had ever been good at was of no use whatsoever. So I told her the truth, which was that her mother and I had been arguing about a thing we did 6 years ago, both of us, and that it was ours and not hers, and that she had walked into the middle of it and it had sounded like her because her name was in it. I said her name was in it because she is the best thing either of us has ever done and that is the only reason. She thought about that for a while. Then she gave me the tag, formally, with both hands, and said, "This is yours." I said thank you. I said it was the best one I had ever been given and that I had a nail in my office and it was going on it, and it is on it, and it has been for 2 months. Then, could she see the machine work? Absolutely not. Why? Because it is for breaking things and you are not a thing, which is the only decent sentence I produced that entire night. Marisol got there 11 minutes after I did, having driven herself, which I did not know she still did. She came through the test floor at a dead run in a coat over what she had been wearing. She stopped about 4 feet away when she saw us, exactly the way she stopped in the doorway at the reunion. She put both hands flat over her face for a second, and then took them down and was completely in order again. She did not say anything to me at all. She went and knelt on the concrete by the rig and asked Poppy whether she was cold, and Poppy said a bit, and Marisol took her own coat off and put it round her and did the buttons. Then she stayed down there on the floor of my laboratory, in a jumper, deep in the night, with her hands on the platform either side of her daughter, and said, out loud, without looking at me, that she had no idea what to do next. I have known that woman for 21 years and I had never heard the sentence before. And that is the point where the question changed, and I felt it change, sitting on a rig with my feet on the rail. Up to then everything in my head had been why did you hide her? It is a good question. I had been carrying it around like a receipt. But she had a security team and a keypad and a log, and I had a rule about telling the truth, and between the two of us we had produced one very determined child alone in the dark on the 2nd street after the bridge. Her system had not held. My honesty had not held. There was no version of that night where either of us on our own was enough. So I said the only useful thing I have said in this entire business. I said, neither can I. Marisol looked up, and after a moment she said, well, then we had better be bad at it in the same building. Being bad at it in the same building turned out to mean mornings. I asked for them because they are the part nobody wants and I had worked out, over about 2 days, that I could not build anything on the good hours. Anybody can do 4 until 6. 4 until 6 is a visit. So from the Monday I was at that house at 20 to 7, 5 days a week, and I did the getting up, the getting dressed, the breakfast and the walk to nursery, and Marisol did the evenings and the bath and the bed. I approached this as an engineering problem, because that is what I am, and I would like to set out my results for the benefit of anybody else attempting it. Week 1 I built a system. Clothes laid out the night before in the order of application. Shoes by the door, bag packed and by the shoes. Timings written on a card. It failed on the Tuesday because she would not wear the trousers that were laid out, on the grounds that they were Monday's trousers, a category I had not been told about and which turns out to be absolute. Week 2 I built a better system, with choice designed into it. 2 acceptable outfits, presented together, child selects. This is standard practice. You do not remove the failure mode, you give it somewhere harmless to go. It failed on the Wednesday because she selected both. Week 3 I stopped building systems and simply got up 25 minutes earlier, which worked immediately and perfectly and taught me nothing except that I had spent a fortnight refusing to pay in the only currency the job accepts. I arrived at my own laboratory at 20 to 10 every day for a month. Ines said nothing about it for 3 weeks and then put a diary on my desk with the mornings crossed out in pen, which is her way of signing an agreement. She did the 8 o'clock calls herself all that month. She did the Hamburg trip that I should have done. She has never once mentioned any of it since, and I am aware that I owe her a year. The thing nobody warns you about is that the good part is not the good part. The good part is the 12 minutes on the walk to nursery, which is when she talks, and she only talks when she is walking and there is nothing to look at. Everything I know about my daughter I learned on 400 meters of pavement between a garden wall and a gate. I want to record that on the 11th morning she took my hand without doing anything about it, in the sense that she did not announce it or check whether it was allowed, and that I had to work quite hard for the next 2 streets. The trouble arrived at 3:10 on a Thursday morning in the 4th week, in the ordinary way that trouble arrives, which is that a child got a temperature. It was not serious. It was 38.4, and it was gone by Saturday, and it was a virus that half the nursery had, and I am putting the numbers in because at the time I would have paid everything I own for somebody to tell me the numbers. I was there because I had stayed over on the sofa on the Wednesday, which we had started doing when there was reason to. I heard her first. I got there first. I did the things you do, which I had read about extensively by then and had never once done. She did not want me. She was not unkind about it. She was 3.5 years old at 2 in the morning in the way that all of them are, and she said, "I want Bex," and then she said it again, and she cried until Bex came. Bex came in from her own flat before I had even got the light on, a coat over pajamas, and did about 4 things in a particular order, and the whole business was over in a quarter of an hour. I stood in the doorway of my daughter's bedroom and watched somebody else do it properly. I want to be careful about this too. It did not damage me. I have read since that most men in that position feel replaced, and I did not, because it was completely obvious to me that the child was right. Bex had done that 200 times. I had done it never. If my daughter has a fever at 3 in the morning I want the 200, and if that is not me, then it is not me. What it did was show me the shape of the thing we had all been carefully not looking at. Afterwards, in the kitchen, at about 4, with the 3 of us round a table and nobody sleeping, Marisol did the thing she does. She started solving it. She said that we should formalize Bex's position. She said there should be a proper contract, a title, a review, a substantial rise, and a clause about notice on both sides. She said it kindly and generously, and it was worth a great deal of money, and it was, I promise you, meant entirely well. And I watched Bex Almeida's face while it was being said, and I have seen that expression before, on my own face, late one night, reading a press statement sent to me by a supplier. I said, no. Ask her. Marisol said, ask her what? I said, ask her what she wants, not what to pay her. What she wants. There was a silence of some length. Bex put her cup down and looked at the table and then said, all right, and then took about 40 seconds to start, and nobody rushed her, and I have not forgotten one word of it. She said she had been in that house within a fortnight of Poppy being born. She said she had done the first tooth, the first steps, 4 house moves, 300 nights and every single hospital appointment except 2. She said she was not asking to be family, because she is not, and she said that people who say that to staff are usually about to take something. She said she has a sister and a life and a flat she likes, and she is not lonely and does not want to be adopted. And she said, what I want is to be told things. She said, in 5 years I have found out about every major change in that child's life after it was decided. The move to this house. The nursery. The reveal at the reunion, which I was told about on the day, at 4 in the afternoon, and I had to buy her a party dress in 40 minutes. She said, I found out that Wyatt Doran existed and was coming to my kitchen from a message that said, a man will be here at 4, be normal. She said, I am not asking for a say. It is not my child and I know exactly where the line is and I have never once crossed it in front of her. I am asking to be told before, instead of after. Then she said the thing that finished it, which she said straight to Marisol, quietly, with no edge on it at all. She said, you do not do it to be unkind. You do it because deciding on your own is faster. And I have watched you do it to a man for 6 years, and I sat in that kitchen and thought, well, at least I am not the only one. Nobody said anything for a bit. Marisol has one great virtue, and it is not warmth, and it is not generosity, which she has in industrial quantities and uses as a door. It is that when she is beaten by a fact she does not argue with it for a second longer. She said, that is fair. She said, I am sorry. She said it once, properly, without any construction round it, which from her is roughly a public monument. And then, because she cannot help herself, she started to say something about how they would put a standing weekly briefing in place, and she heard herself say it, and stopped, and put her hands over her eyes and laughed, at 4 in the morning, which is the first time I had heard that in 6 years. So that is how the arrangement got made, at a kitchen table, at 4:30, by 3 tired people, and no paper of any kind. Bex gets told first. Everything. Before the decision if possible, before it happens always. Marisol keeps the evenings and the bedtime and does not have to be efficient about them. And I gave up the thing I had been quietly building towards for a month, which was half the week at my flat. I had a room. I had been to 2 shops. I had bought a bed with a rail on it and put it together on a Sunday, and there were 16 pounds of unnecessary safety equipment in that room, all of it fitted correctly, all of it by a man who knows what he is doing. She is not going to sleep in it, in any regular way, 4 years. That was the decision. Because the whole point of what we had built at the table was that this child has one home and one wall with the week on it and one set of stairs she can do in the dark, and that the adults are the ones who move. So I am the one who moves. I get up at 6:20 and drive across a city and let myself in at 7:20, 5 days a week, and I will be doing it until she is old enough to have an opinion about it. It was mine to give and I gave it, and I would like it noted that I did not have to. I had a stronger claim that morning than I have ever had since, and there was no paper, and nobody could have stopped me taking more. Ines asked me about it once, in the car park, in the flat way she asks things. Had I at least got something for it? No. She said, right, and then, after a moment, that it was probably correct, and then she went inside, which from Ines Vargas is an embrace. By the middle of October the house worked. Not smoothly. There was an argument about screen time that ran for 9 days and a genuine crisis about a lost rabbit, and I discovered that I am incapable of doing hair and have made my peace with being bad at one thing publicly and forever. It worked. 3 adults, 1 child, 1 wall with the week on it in colors, and a rule that everybody gets told before instead of after, which left exactly one thing in that house that nobody had settled, and it was not the child, and it had not been the child for some time. Tobias Renner had spent 2 months with nothing, and a man like that does not stop, he just gets quieter and more thorough. He went round everybody. That is his method and there is nothing clever in it. He asked 40 people the same 4 questions and waited for one of them to be helpful. The one who was helpful was my mother. She is 71 and lives in the house I grew up in and is the kindest person I have ever met, and she talks to anybody who telephones, and a nice man rang up who had been at school with her son and wanted to send a card. She told him that it was all lovely news about the little girl. She told him that Marisol had always been a thoughtful girl, and then she told him, because she thought it was a nice thing to say about somebody, that Marisol had rung her every November for 6 years to ask how everyone was keeping. Every November. 6 times. My mother had a Christmas card from Marisol Quint on the mantelpiece every year I sat in that front room and I never once looked at the mantelpiece. Tobias is not a genius. He does not have to be. A woman rings the same person on the same month of every year for 6 years and asks after one man's health, and you do not need a great deal of training to know what you are looking at. He found the rest of it in about a fortnight, and none of it was stolen and none of it was made up. Diligence firms bill through companies. Companies file accounts. It is all there for anybody who is prepared to be extremely boring for a long stretch of afternoons. Published on a Tuesday. It was 500 words and it was accurate and it did not mention Poppy once, which I noted at the time and still note. The headline was that Marisol Quint had commissioned quarterly reports on a private individual for 6 years, and that the private individual was the father of her child, and that he had not known. And there was no answer to it. That is what I understood by about 9 in the morning. It was true. Every word of it was true, and I had read the reports myself, on a desk, less than a fortnight before. It did her real damage, and the damage was not what an outsider would guess. Nobody cared that a rich woman had been strange about her ex-husband. People love that. It ran for a day as an amusement. What did the damage was that her company sells predictability. Cadence has 4 contracts with education authorities and 2 with a care provider, and the entire proposition is that you can hand this firm your timetables and your buildings and your children and it will be discreet. There was now a 500-word article saying the founder ran a 6-year private monitoring operation on a member of the public. It is a bad look, and the bad look was earned, and by Thursday 2 of her clients had asked for meetings and 1 had asked for a statement in writing. She did what she does. She was extremely fast and completely wrong. By Thursday night she had drafted a letter standing herself down from the board, and a proposal to move her holding into a structure with independent directors, and a personal statement taking full responsibility and explaining nothing. And she had decided, as a separate matter, that the sensible thing was to be somewhere else for a while, and that Poppy was now old enough for the flat in the other city, and that it would be for a few months and would take the whole thing out of the air. She had it all built by nearly midnight on Thursday. It is genuinely magnificent, what she can do in a day, and every single item on it was the same move she made 6 years ago. And she told Bex. She told Bex first, late that same night, because she had promised at a kitchen table in October that Bex gets told before instead of after, and because whatever else Marisol Quint is, she does not say a thing and then not do it. Bex rang me at 20 past. She said 8 words. She said, she is about to do it again, come. I have thought about that a great deal since. We built that rule for Bex. We built it because a woman had spent 5 years finding out afterwards, and it was a debt, and we paid it. And the rule turned round about 6 weeks later and saved the entire thing, because it put one honest person in the middle of a decision that had always previously been made alone in a room, late at night. I got there at midnight. The papers were on the kitchen table in 3 neat stacks, which is how I know she had already printed them. I did not shout. We have established that neither of us shouts and that this is not necessarily an advantage. I said, you are leaving. She said it was 3 months and it was sensible and it was not the same thing at all. I said, name one part of it that is different. She said, this time I am telling you. And I said, you are telling me at midnight with it printed. That stopped her. I watched it stop her, and I want to be honest that I did not enjoy it, because at that point I had begun to be able to tell the difference between winning an argument and getting somewhere. Then I said the thing I had worked out in the car. I said that the reason she keeps doing this is not arrogance, and that I had stopped believing it was, somewhere around the second box file. I said she does it because taking a hit alone is the only version where she cannot be told that she is a burden, and that she would rather carry the whole thing on her own back forever than find out what somebody else would say if she asked. I said, 6 years ago you decided what I would answer, and you left, and you were so certain that you never asked. And you are about to do it again, in a kitchen, in October, with the printer still warm. She sat down. Not gracefully. She said, then tell me what else there is, because I have gone through it and there is nothing. I said there was one thing left that she had never tried in her life, and it was to stand next to somebody and answer for a thing badly, in public, without a plan. She said, and where exactly? And I said, the nursery. She looked at me as though I had suggested we solve it with a raffle. But it is not a joke, and I had not meant it as one. The article had gone round the parents' group by Wednesday lunchtime. 11 families had read it. 2 of them had said things at the gate. There is exactly one public in this whole business whose opinion has any effect on my daughter's actual life, and it has nothing to do with the financial press, and nothing to do with 460 people in a class group. Public that actually matters is the 11 other families in the yellow room. The autumn evening was the following Tuesday. It is a thing they do with paintings on the walls and a table of biscuits and 30 small chairs, and both of us were on the list because both of us had signed the form. We did not prepare anything. That was the entire point and it very nearly killed her. What should she say? She asked me twice in the car. I do not know. That was not helpful. No, it is not. So we went in and sat on chairs designed for people of 4, and looked at 11 paintings of families, one of which had 3 adults and a child and a large horse in it, which is ours, and which Bex has photographed. About 20 minutes in, a woman called Priya, whose son is Poppy's second best friend, asked her outright, in front of everybody, whether it was true about the reports. I want to be clear that this was not cruelty. She has a 4-year-old in that room and she had read an article about surveillance and she asked a direct question in a place where she was entitled to. There was a silence of about 4 seconds, which is very long on a small chair. And then I answered first, because I had worked out in the car that whatever happened I was not going to let her go into it alone, and because the worst fact in the whole story is mine and not hers. I said, it is true. I said, she had a firm right to report on me every 3 months for 6 years and I did not notice, and I would like everybody here to sit with that for a second, because I have had to. I said I run a laboratory whose entire business is noticing when a thing is not what it says on the box, and I did not notice this, and I am the one it was happening to. Somebody laughed. It was not a nice laugh and it was not a cruel one, it was the laugh of a room that has been holding its breath. Then Marisol went, and she was terrible, and it was the best thing she has ever done. She did not have a line. She started a sentence about her reasoning and abandoned it halfway. She said the word sorry twice in the wrong places. She said she had told herself for 6 years that she was waiting for the right moment and that this was not true, and that the honest version is that she was frightened of the answer and made a system to avoid ever having to hear it. She said, I am extremely good at building systems, and I built one to keep myself from asking a man a question, and it lasted 6 years and cost my daughter 4 of them. She said it badly, in the wrong order, twice, on a chair that was too small for her, to 11 people she had never met, and half of them were parents and all of them understood every word. Nobody applauded, because it was a nursery and not a film. Tia said, right, and then, thank you for saying. And then a man near the biscuits asked whether anybody knew where the sign-up sheet for the Christmas thing had gone. And that was it. That was the entire public reckoning. It took 4 minutes and there is no recording of it anywhere. I do not want to overstate what it fixed. It did not fix the clients. Aldergate Care, the provider, took another 6 weeks and an actual independent review by an auditor named Marguerite Fenn, which she paid for and which found what it was always going to find and made a long list of recommendations that Cadence adopted. She stayed on the board. She did not go to the other city. The papers in 3 neat stacks went into the recycling on the Sunday and neither of us mentioned them again. What it fixed was smaller and it was the only thing I cared about. The Friday, the 2 mothers who had said something at the gate said something different at the gate, and my daughter's week did not change, and nobody photographed a nursery. Tobias sent me one message, on the Wednesday. It said he had heard about the nursery and that it sounded like the right thing, and that he was glad, and it did not ask for anything at all. I looked at it for a while. He had made himself into a joke on the front of his own clip. He had lost the room he had been the middle of for 15 years. He had also, by being relentless and slightly cruel, been the direct cause of the only honest 4 minutes either of us managed in public. I did not want to be gracious. I sat there and genuinely tried to work out whether I could be bothered. Then I wrote back and said, you never did check the room after that sentence. He did not reply for 2 days. Then he sent one word, which was noted, and I have not heard from him since, and I understand from Gus that he has stopped doing the thing about other people entirely and is currently doing something about restaurants. So that was the end of it. All of it. Clip, the class, the article, the reports, the 6 years. Everything that had been chasing us since the 29th of August was on the ground and finished by the middle of November, and there was nothing left to manage. Which is precisely when Marisol Quint, with nothing left to organize, sat me down and offered me everything I had ever asked for. She did it on a Sunday, in the kitchen, with a folder, which should have told me everything. The offer was complete. I have to describe it properly, because if I make it sound like a trick then none of what I did afterwards makes any sense at all. Parental responsibility, formally recorded, so that nobody could ever again decide what I was allowed. She had already had it drawn. It needed my signature and nothing else. The house at number 9, on Thorncliffe Row, the same street as the nursery, 4 doors from the yellow room. She had bought it in October. In my name. She said this the way you would mention a delivery. Any days I wanted, not a schedule. The word she used was any, and she meant it, and with Marisol Quint that word is load-bearing. And then the last part, which she had left until the end and which she delivered without any warning at all. She said she would step back. She said Cadence needed her in the other city anyway for at least 18 months, and that she would take it, and do evenings by screen, and come at weekends, and that Poppy would have her daily life with me. She said, you lost 6 years. I have 6 to give back. It is the only thing I own that you actually want. I want to write down what that felt like, because I have been unfair to her in this account in places and I am not going to be unfair here. It was not a maneuver. She had done the work. She had spent 6 weeks and a great deal of money assembling the single most generous thing anybody has ever put in front of me, and she meant every word, and she was frightened while she said it. And I nearly took it. I would like to say I saw it at once. I did not. I sat in that kitchen and looked at a folder that contained my daughter, 4 doors from her nursery, permanently, on paper, and I felt something in my chest go loose that had been tight since the 29th of August. I said I needed a few days. She said of course, and then she went and did the bins, because she had nothing else to do with her hands. Bex thought I was mad. I told her on the Tuesday, on the walk back from the gate, and she stopped on the pavement and asked me to say the last part again. Said Marisol would go to the other city and I would have the daily life. Bex said, and you are thinking about it? I said yes. She said, Wyatt, that is everything you have asked for since August, and you got it without a solicitor and without a fight, and you are standing on a pavement pulling a face. I said I know. She said, take it. And then she said the thing that actually frightened me, which was, you might not get offered anything again. She said, people who make offers like that once do not make them twice. She was right. That is what made the whole week unbearable. Every sensible person I could have asked would have said the same thing, and the only argument I had against it was a shape I could feel and could not name. What broke it open was a picture frame. Bex had said, weeks before, that the crayon tag on the nail in my office would go brown and curl and that I should put it behind glass before it did. I bought a frame on the Thursday. Small, black, from the shop by the bridge. I took the tag off the nail at about 7 in the evening with the office empty, and I turned it over to get the crayon side facing out. The back was not blank. There were 4 addresses on it, in Marisol's handwriting, one under another, and the first 3 were crossed out. The first was my old flat, the one I left 4 years ago. Crossed out. Second was a road I did not recognize at all, which I looked up afterwards and which is where my mother's sister lives. Crossed out. The third was the lab. She had written the street and the number and got as far as the postcode, and crossed the whole thing out, hard, twice. The fourth was not crossed out. It was not finished either. It says my name and the first 2 words of the street and then nothing. And in the corner, small, the way she dates everything, it says the 9th of May. I sat in an empty office for about 20 minutes with a piece of yellow card, and then I drove across the city and knocked on a door at 9:30 at night and asked her what happened on the 9th of May. She did not pretend not to know. She has never once done that. She sat down on the stairs in the hall, which is not a thing she does, and she told me, and it took 4 minutes. The 8th of May is Poppy's birthday. She was 5. She had the party, and the cake, and more children than the kitchen could really hold, and at the end of it there is a thing they do where you ask what they want for the year ahead. Poppy said she wanted to send her tag to her dad. Marisol said she asked her what she meant, and Poppy explained, patiently, the way she explains things to adults, that he sends her one every year and that she had made one back and that she needed the place it goes. Not a present. Not a visit. Not a father. She asked for an address. And Marisol Quint, who at that moment could have bought a street, sat at her desk the following evening with a piece of yellow card and tried to write down where her daughter's father lives, and got 4 goes at it, and could not finish one of them because there is no address you can write on that card that does not end the story. If you write it, somebody posts it. If somebody posts it, a man in a laboratory opens an envelope. She said she sat there until about 1 in the morning and then put the card in a drawer, and told Poppy the next day that she would sort it out, which is the closest thing to a lie she has ever told, and she knew it when she said it. I asked what she did for the 3 months after that. She said, I tried to find a version where I was still right. She said she made herself 2 more conditions. She wanted the accounts filed and the buyout confirmed independently. She wanted 1 more quarterly report. She said she got both by the end of June and then invented a 3rd one, and that was the week she understood what she was doing. I said, the 12th of March. She said yes. She said the threshold had been true since March. She had known since about the 20th. She did nothing for 11 weeks. She said, it was never a threshold. It was a wall, and every time you got near it I moved it, and I moved it 4 times, and the last time I was moving it a 5-year-old asked me for an address and I could not move it any further. Then I asked the last thing, which was why the reunion. Why a room with 31 people in it and a man she had not spoken to in 6 years? And this is the answer I have thought about most, out of everything I was told in 5 weeks. She said, because everywhere else in the world is mine. She said that if she had asked me to an office I would have come as a man who had been sent for. If she had come to the lab I would have been standing in my own doorway being visited. If she had written, I would have read it alone and had 6 hours to decide what to be about it. She said, I could not find one room where we were the same size. And then Gus rang me about a reunion. She said, 31 people who knew both of us at 19, and neither of us in charge of the room. It was the only place left where I could stand in front of you as a person from your class. She said, I had it down to 3 minutes. Arrive at 20 to 9. Bring her as far as the doorway so you would see her before anybody said anything. One sentence. Leave. I had it written on my hand in the car. And she said, Poppy got out of the car. She said, she undid the seat belt herself, which she has been able to do since March, and I was talking to the driver, and by the time I got to the lift she was already in it with a woman who thought she was somebody's daughter, which she was. She said, 40 seconds. I have been running things for 6 years and I lost it by 40 seconds. I sat on the stairs next to her in the hall for a while after that because I finally had the whole of it, and the whole of it did not make her a monster and did not make her a saint, and the useful part was not the story at all. What was useful was that I had a folder at home with a house in it, and the house was 4 doors from the nursery, and she was going to the other city for 18 months. She had spent 6 years moving a wall so that she would never have to hear the answer. And then she had built me the most generous thing I have ever been offered, and put it in a folder, and at the bottom of it was a plan to be somewhere else. I gave her the answer on the Saturday, in the kitchen, because that is where the folder was and I wanted it on the table between us while I did it. I said no. Then I said the rest of it quickly, before she could start being reasonable at me, because she is very fast and I had one clear run at this and I knew it. I said, before anything else, that this is not me asking you for anything. I said, I am not asking you to love me and I am not asking you to try, and if you never do, that is yours and I will not raise it again. I said it plainly and I said it first, because I could see her already assembling the kind face people use when they are about to be gentle with somebody, and I would rather have been hit. I said, this is about the child, and I will make the whole argument on those terms, and if it does not stand up on those terms then I have no argument. Then I told her what the folder actually was. I said, you are offering her one parent at a time. I said, in this version she has me for 18 months and a screen in the evenings, and then presumably you come back and we swap, and she has you for a while and a man who comes on Tuesdays. I said, that is not 2 parents. That is a rota. And the last time you designed a rota you did it in a doorway 6 years ago and you were extremely sure about it then as well. She said that was not fair. I said it was completely fair and that she knew it, and she stopped, because she does not argue with a fact for longer than a second. I said, you have built the most generous thing anybody has ever offered me and at the bottom of it is a plan to be in another city, and you cannot tell me those 2 facts are unrelated, because I have read 24 reports and I have seen how you do it. I said, when it gets close, you leave, and you make the leaving into a gift so that nobody can be angry about it. Then I said the only thing I actually wanted, and I had rehearsed it about 40 times in a car and it still came out badly. I said, I do not want the house. I want you in the building. I said, I want her to grow up in a place where the 2 people who made her are in the same room, being bad at it, in front of her, regularly. Not efficiently. Not on a schedule. In the same room, getting it wrong. I said, because if she does not see that, then what she learns is that the adults who love her arrange themselves around each other very carefully and never occupy the same space. And she will do that for the rest of her life, and she will think it is normal, and she will be extremely good at it, and she will be alone at 37 in a very well-organized flat. I said, I would know. I built one. And I said, and so did you, and yours has 4 bedrooms and a stair gate screwed into plasterboard. There was quite a long silence after that. She sat with her hands flat on the table, the way she sat at the reunion, and she said, and what is the arrangement? I said, there is not one. She said, there has to be an arrangement. And I said no, and that this was the entire point, and that I was not going to hand her a specification because a specification is just a wall with better manners, and that she would move it within a month, and I would let her, because I am not actually any better at this than she is. Then what do you want me to do? And she meant it. She was asking, and in 21 years I had never once heard Marisol Quint ask a person in a room what she should do. I do not know. That is the offer. I do not know, and neither do you, and I would like us to not know here rather than in 2 cities. She did not answer for a long time. I want to be accurate about how long, because I counted the clock at the end of it and it was somewhere over 2 minutes, which is an extraordinary length of time to sit at a table with somebody. I have thought since that I was watching a person do arithmetic and get no answer, over and over, and refuse to stop trying, because arithmetic is the only thing she has ever trusted. Then she pushed the folder about 4 inches towards me and said, sign that 1 page. The responsibility 1. That 1 is not a wall. I signed it. I would have signed that 1 in the first week. It does not say what I am allowed. It says what I am. Those are not the same document and I had spent 5 weeks refusing the other kind. Then she took the rest of the folder and put it on the chair beside her, and said she would deal with it, and she has, and I did not ask how. Number 9 went on the market in January and sold in March, and neither of us has mentioned it once since the day it went up. She did not go to the other city. She sent somebody else, which she could have done at any point in the previous 6 weeks, a fact I have had the sense never to raise. There is no paper about any of it. There is no schedule. There is a wall in a kitchen with the week on it in colors, and I am on it in green, and I have been for 4 months. I still get up at 6:20 and drive across a city. That has not changed, and it is not going to. Some evenings I am still there at 9 because nobody has asked me to leave, and it stopped being a thing that anybody remarks on around the middle of December. What we are is not defined. I want to be honest about that, because the tidy version is available and I could write it and it would be a lie. We are 2 people who have dinner 4 nights a week with our daughter and a woman called Bex who now gets told everything first and takes full advantage of it. Some of those evenings are extremely good. 2 of them in February were not, and one of those was entirely my fault and was about a dishwasher. I do not know what we are going to be. I have stopped needing to know by a particular date, which is the only genuine change in my character that this whole business has produced. Gus rang in February about the next reunion. He already had the room booked, the same top floor at the Cazalet, the same river view. He was very excited. He said everyone was asking. He said it would be 16 years and that people had been talking about it since August and that there was, and I quote him exactly, enormous interest. He said, they would love to see you both together with her. And I said no, Gus. I said it kindly, because he is a good man and he made 4 phone calls that got me a daughter and he will be having dinner at my table at Christmas for the rest of his life. But I said no, and I said we are not going to that room again, and we are certainly not taking her into it. He said, but they would love it. I said I know. That is the reason. They are not getting the second half. They had 41 seconds and a caption and a year of material, and it cost a 5-year-old 6 days of nursery, and there is no version of me that walks the child back into that room so that 31 people can see how it turned out. He was disappointed for about a day and has since decided the whole thing was his idea, which is fine, and which is in a sense true. The last part one want to put down happened on an ordinary Wednesday in March, and there is nothing in it. That is why I am putting it down. I was in the kitchen at about 7:20 in the morning doing the toast, and Poppy was on the floor doing something complicated to a shoe, and Marisol came down still doing an earring, and Bex was already there because she is always already there. And Poppy said, without looking up, Dad, this one is broken. That is all. She wanted the other shoes. The buckle had gone on that one and she wanted the other shoes. Nobody in that kitchen reacted. Nobody looked at anybody. Bex went on making the packed lunch. Marisol found the earring. The first time I heard that word it went to the back wall of a room with 31 people in it and 2 phones up, and a woman in a doorway said a sentence she had written down. And the second 100 and something time, it was about a shoe, on a Wednesday, at 7:20, and it did not mean anything at all, and I nearly had to leave the room. I fixed the buckle. It took no time at all. 6 years of professional experience with the failure modes of children's fastenings, and I have never enjoyed anything so much in my life. Then, on the Sunday, I took her to the lab, properly, in daylight, with permission, with Bex, and with the drop rig switched off at the wall and the key in my pocket. I showed her the test floor and the racks in the wall where the reports go. She was mainly interested in the forklift, which is normal, and at the end I sat her at the bench and got a blank tag out of the drawer and filled one in with her watching, and I did it properly, in the right hand, in the right ink. Item, the 2-stage magnetic latch, that manufacturer, that shroud. Mode of failure, defeated by user under 5 years of age by sequential release, no tools. And in the code box, 6 characters, and the first 4 are the standard and the series, and the last 2 are the engineer. I asked her what her initials were. She told me she is Poppy Quint and I have never once suggested that she should be anything else, and that is a thing she and her mother will sort out one day without any help from me. So the last 2 characters are P and Q, and I wrote them in the box, and it is a real code and it means a real thing and anybody in my trade could read it off that card in a second. Then I punched the hole and put the washer in and gave it to her. She looked at it for a while, and she asked whether it meant she had broken the gate. I said yes. I said it means the gate failed, and that you are the one who failed it, and that your initials go in the box because you are the one who found it out. She thought about that. Then, could she do the oven lock as well? Not today.
So, what do you think about Wyatt and Marisol's story? Was Marisol wrong for hiding Poppy from him for 6 years, even if she believed she was protecting both of them? Or was Wyatt just as responsible for building a life so controlled and predictable that he never once went looking for her? In the end, neither of them really had everything figured out. Marisol called it a plan, Wyatt called it order, but Poppy somehow managed to break through both of their carefully built worlds and bring them back into the same room. Do you think they'll eventually become a real couple again? Or are they better off simply learning how to be parents together? Let me know what you think in the comments. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more manhwa recaps.